Kamen Rider Geats is a show that I wasn't super excited about before it started. I don't know if it's just that I'm older or maybe I just lost interest in Toku a little bit with being so hyper fixated on it with the YouTube channel, but Geats was just not doing it for me, especially when I found out it was going to be written by the same guy who wrote X8 and 01. Those are two shows I'm not particularly in love with. I've also just been turned off to the idea of having a ton of riders in one show for like quite some time now. I miss the days when it was just like one or two dudes running around, and I know that's an incredibly boomer take. I just feel like the show is needlessly giving everyone a driver nowadays. And I know it's in the good name of selling toys and whatnot, but it's a little overwhelming, and I honestly am kind of bored of it at this point. Having a lot of riders was a really interesting concept when Ryuki did it back in the day. I say that as if I knew what in Sam hell Kamen Rider was before Ryuki, as if like Dragon Knight in 2009 wasn't my first foray into the series, but regardless, I can understand how that could be a really interesting concept back then when the show was just coming back. Regardless of whatever issues you have with Ryuki itself, I find it to be a really interesting character study on what it means to be a Kamen Rider, a concept I've been tackling a lot for quite some time now. But instead of focusing on one altruistically hyper justified protagonist who can do no wrong, it introduces a ton of characters who are uniquely justified and possess their own set of morals and perspectives, each of whom can be considered good people, but they're all uniquely flawed. Even Shinji, the show's main character, can be seen as like annoying and hypocritical. It toys around with the idea of justice and what would motivate someone to fight. Even a character like Oja has his reasons, although it can be argued that the existence of such a character is only really meant to juxtapose the seemingly deep motivations behind the rest of the cast. Bruh. But to someone like Oja, he's totally justified in like whatever it is he's trying to do. Ryuki was really cool because it expanded what it meant to be a Kamen Rider. Opening up that title to such a large cast of characters expands the show's conventional ideology and allows for a more diverse set of heroes who audiences can idolize and hopefully project themselves onto. It really meant something to be a Kamen Rider back then, and Ryuki really shook up that status quo that was previously even shaken up before that with Kamen Rider Kuuga. It's really not talked about enough how much the early Heisei era really attempted to like reinvent the show, especially in that first like 6 to 7 years or so. We need to talk about that more. Every year or so, a series comes along that a lot of people will refer to as the next Ryuki. By that I mean lame people say this whenever they find out that a series is gonna have a couple more riders than we're typically used to, as if that's the only thing that matters. The first one that really comes to mind is Kamen Rider Gaim. It was the first series in a while to have more than 2 or 3 riders, unless you want to count like the mages and White Wizard, I guess. But the comparison is totally valid. Each of these characters has their own motivations and blah 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 blah. The next time I really remember this happening was with Saber, and people were really annoying when this happened back in the day because Saber is a literal Dragon Knight, but we knew from the beginning that this show was going to have 10 plus riders, and that was a really exciting thing for some people. I don't understand why. 01 had 9 or 10 if you want to count Izu as 02. Geo had 9, Build had a modest 6, X8 also had 9. I guess having 1 or 2 extra riders back then was like a really big deal 2 years ago. Also, none of these are counting movie exclusives, by the way. These are literally just ones in the show. If we were to count movie riders, we'd be well past 15 in some of these cases. Even recently, Revice had like 10 to 12, depending on how you want to count things, really. And for whatever reason, people freaked out when they heard that Geats was going to have 10 plus riders, as if that was suddenly not the status quo as of today. Along with Geats having a larger cast, of course, came the Ryuki comparisons yet again, and I would love to say that these people are lame in this instance too, but this time I actually kind of got it. On paper, Geats and Ryuki have the same exact premise. A ton of riders are fighting in this game for a chance to be granted a wish that will bring to reality whatever their deepest desires are. It's the same show damn near on paper, but don't get it twisted. Geats tackles this concept in a really unique and different, interesting way compared to Ryuki, in a way that's not at all surface level, in that the main character is actually the seasoned veteran this time, and the secondary rider is the inexperienced optimist that wants all the other riders to be happy. Alright, I'm not giving Geats enough credit here. It's 30, by the way. 29 if you don't count Ben and John, because they technically don't have suits. Oh, 30 riders. I knew you were going to ask about that. I just didn't feel like telling you that until just now. Let's talk about all of them. So yeah, there's like 30 riders, but I really don't have much to say on characters like Groovy. As much as I love this little flappy-eared cutie here, I don't know what else to say other than why the hell would they make a suit for him and not Ben and John when literally everyone is clamoring for them two to transform? There's a ton of riders here that really just show up for like a couple episodes and don't really add much to the show outside of letting us be like, oh wow, there's a ton of riders. It's not every single one of them, but it's a good number, I feel like. But also, I honestly feel like a lot more props need to be given to Bandai and Plex here. The Desire Driver is super customizable and you can really make it whatever you want with the ride buckles and the ID cores. It makes for a really fun toy that can be believably used by a ton of different riders. Plex is the company that designs all the suits for Rider and Sentai, and it was a really smart move on their behalf to like have every rider share the exact same black silhouette. The only thing that really changes from rider to rider is the mask, and it's honestly a genius way to save budget and reuse a lot of these suits. Some riders have these fun little additions here or there, like Geats has this scarf, Nago has these armbands, Buffa has this little skirt looking type thing, and Tycoon has this anti-chafing thigh band. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, those are really the only 4 riders that have anything like that. It's almost like they're the only ones that matter. Like they're the main characters or something. So yeah, let's talk about them. Real quick before we do that, I do want to touch on the DGP staff, and I do feel like we should go over the support riders at some point too, but I really feel like it's safe to say that we could dump the other 20 or so. The DGP staff really are a bunch of clowns. I've always got this feeling that they were meant to be way more intimidating than they actually came across. In my mind, they were just this rotating cast of buffoons that were only really there for like the purposes of pushing the narrative forward. I feel like every 5 to 10 episodes, one would die or like get fired or leave or something would happen, and we'd either get a new guy to take up their job, or they'd introduce a character with a new job title as if that's something that we should be concerned with, like a producer or a director or game master or management or fucking head of HR. I stopped keeping track of all their job titles once I realized that they were all just meaningless. They would often come in, talk about how important this little game was to them, and then threaten to end the world and remake it. Like in order to like build stakes and add tension or whatever, as if that literally didn't happen in episode 1. The number of times they would talk about ending and remaking the universe in this show really lost its luster once it happened for like the millionth and first time. Like there was literally an episode where Beroba like blows up the entire planet and the episode ends on that as a cliffhanger, but then we start the next episode and everything is just fine. And it's crazy how I got so invested in that when it literally happened in episode 1. They literally did that in episode 1, and I was like, damn, it's gonna be different this time. And then after that, they threatened to do it again almost like every other episode, and it's like, dude, you do that once a month damn near. It's not interesting anymore. Get more water. Okay, we're back. Oh, what was that? Oh, you like this shirt? This shirt? Right here? Reiki Tori. He has a ton of Kamen Rider inspired shirts. Whole collection on Geats. I think you'll like it. He'll be in the description. That was smooth. That was good. I wasn't even planning on that when I got the water. I'm good. I'm good like that. Where was I at? Oh yeah, the DGP staff just was like really super boring and like unintimidating. The whole worm thing aside. Actually, I want to touch on that real quick. Which one of you tweeted about like that was twerking? Who tweeted that? Which one of you tweeted that? And which one of y'all's in the rest of the crowd liked that tweet? Huh? Raise your hands. Come on. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I just have questions. Like, are you stupid? Or like, how often are you on the internet? And do you think the amount of pornography you consume has had any effect on your relationship with like innocent children's shows? Just like be real with me. All right, so like I just found myself more interested in like the main cast and like the interactions between them and like understanding their motivations and watching their characters develop like throughout the year. That was just so much more interesting to me than like whatever the rest of the company was doing. I immediately gravitated towards Keiwa the minute that we were introduced to him. As like a recent college graduate, like I saw a lot of myself in him. I was also doing the whole job interview circuit type thing when the show began, so like it's obvious that I could see a lot of myself in him, especially during that first episode. If this was any other series, he'd probably be the main rider, and I'd probably find him really annoying. He's a super meek, optimistic kid who like just wants to see the best in people. He's very main rider coded, and I think the show knows that, considering how much Kekra is like hyper fixated on this idea of turning him into like a true Kamen Rider. Yo, he's just like me for real. I know a lot of people take issue with where his character sort of ended up in the later episodes, having him adopt this whole bad boy persona and whatnot, but in his defense, his sister died. His last remaining family member like literally passed away before his very eyes. Tell me that wouldn't mess you up a little bit. Like, you'd probably go backpacking through Europe for a summer or something like that. And honestly, I think that's just as bad as wearing black and trying to kill your friends. At least Keiwa was like upfront about being a douche, you know what I mean? I really liked his character. He really might be like my favorite rider in a while. Nago's also really interesting. At first, I was super annoyed with her whole setup. I really thought this show was not gonna pass the Bechdel test. I'm gonna be so for real with you. Her whole thing is that she wanted a boyfriend, and like, of course they would make that the girl's main goal. And I know I said I really wasn't gonna touch on side characters really, but Keiwa's sister was really created just to prop up Keiwa's character, as literally every conversation she has is about Keiwa. Like, yeah, she does talk to Neon a bunch, but it always circles back to her younger brother. Neon is different in that we're slowly introduced to her family life and like her upbringing and stuff. She's this rich girl with abusive helicopter parents. All she wanted to do with her life was like live by her own means and like think for herself, and I think that was so much more interesting for her character than just liking boys and doing TikTok dances, especially given the reveal that happens later on in the show. She has this really big identity crisis while still trying to find herself. Like, she doesn't even know who she is yet, and now you're gonna tell her that she isn't even like a real person. It's fire. I love that. I would have liked her more if Kyuun soft ass didn't come in and ruin that whole thing. He's like that dumbass trope about like having a crush on someone else but not being able to tell them. He's literally like Helga coded from Hey Arnold, except I'm like way more annoyed with it because I literally wanted Neon to focus on anything that wasn't a dude. And like, she was doing a really good job at that, but then Kyuun had to come in and like throw a wrench in that whole thing. If you took Kyuun out of the show, I might say, actually, no, I'm gonna say she actually is one of the best female riders to ever do it. Like, her and John definitely both share that top tier spot. Not to mention, I really like the beat buckle. Like, unironically, like, I know I just showed off the shirt, but like, she's so like, she has like the most aesthetically pleasing suit, not just because she's like a girl or anything weird like that. Like, it's, I like the pink and blue. You guys know I like pink and blue. Stop it. Buffa's also really interesting, but also like not. His whole thing is that he wrote off every single Kamen Rider after he watched two of them kill his best friend who was also a Kamen Rider. So his idea to get back at the Kamen Riders is to become a Kamen Rider so that he can kill all of the Kamen Riders. It's not super logical. It's a little weird. My friend Nox, who also happens to be the co-host of my podcast Runaway Tokusatsu, he brought up a few times on the show how Buffa's really sort of meant to be this guy that rushes into everything and only really reacts to things based off of his emotions, and how that kind of goes with the whole bull thing because he kind of just charges into things without thinking. And I really like that interpretation of him a lot. But I can also see how he's annoying to some people because he acts like he's just so deeply justified in what he does, when in reality he's like just sad and misunderstood and edgy. He's the Shadow of the Hedgehog of this cast. If Keiwa wasn't here though, he'd probably be my favorite rider in the show. Like, what can I say? I do love a good hater, man. And he honestly has some of the best fights in the entire show. Like, does anyone else remember when he used the command twin buckle and like hit himself just so like he could use it to beat the shit out of Geats? Like, that was one of the greatest moments in the entire show. I literally screamed when that happened. Or like when he went on his tirade kicking the shit out of every single known Kamen Rider. He was just so entertaining to watch whenever he was on screen. And also, he had this sick chainsaw sword. I'm so mad. I am so mad that the toy is not as cool as the sword is in the show, because that is a sick sword in the show, but the toy is just, I mean, what were they gonna do? Make a chainsaw? Like make a literal chainsaw? Okay. Oh yeah, and Beroba is okay. I really thought she would have been like this really cool big bad, but I understand why she wasn't. And now for the main character, there's not anything wrong with him, but like he's just cool. Everything he does is cool. His fights are cool. His personality is cool. The way he flips his hair is really cool. He's just a cool dude. Yeah, he has this really interesting backstory about being alive for over 2,000 years and this whole thing about his mom and stuff being the creation goddess, but like a lot of that gets lost in just how fucking cool he is. Like I can say that all day, but there's no humanly way I could ever possibly explain to you just how cool Ace is. No one in the show even has to tell you he's cool. He's just cool. Like Kabuto is cool and Kuuga is too, but there's a ton of characters in the show who like have to tell the audience how cool they are. Like no one has to do that with Ace. He just is the shit, and like you know that. I really feel like if Ace didn't have so much natural charisma, I probably would have hated the show. Like they did a great job casting him. Like if they pulled another Ninja and casted a Takaharu level actor, this whole show would have fallen apart. This whole show would have fallen apart. Okay, so like I actually might be wrong about there not being a character who has to mention how cool Ace is. Ziin's whole personality revolves around dick riding Ace, but he shows up late enough to where you've already made up your mind on how cool Geats is. So him being around just ends up being more annoying than anything else. But he also leaves fairly soon after being introduced, so it's not even a real issue. All four of the main riders are great, and they honestly carry what otherwise would have been a really weak story in my opinion. So like, is Geats mid? I would say it's literally a peg or two, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 above mid. It's actually quite good. Like I really enjoyed it, and I honestly haven't enjoyed a Kamen Rider this much since like Build. Here's a video on the first episode of Geats in case you want to see how my opinions changed over time, and here's a video on if Kamen Rider are good people, which I referenced when I was talking about Keiwa earlier. Thanks for watching.